Part 3. Love Beyond Boundaries Characters. Emma Rodriguez. Oliver Sterling. Supporting cast setting. Various locations culminating in a rooftop garden plot. After overcoming misunderstandings and external pressures, Emma and Oliver realize that true connection transcends social status, leading to a heartfelt declaration of love under the stars. Part 1. The Unexpected Meeting. Ma Rodriguez wiped the steam from her forehead as she worked behind the counter of Moonbeam Coffee, a cozy little shop tucked between a vintage bookstore and a flower shop on 5th Street. The morning rush was in full swing. The familiar sounds of grinding beans and frothing milk created a symphony she had grown to love over the past 2 years. At 25, Emma split her time between serving lattes and pursuing her passion for painting, though lately the latter felt more like a distant dream than a realistic goal. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and paint stains dotted her apron from the previous night's art session. She had stayed up until 3 in the morning working on a piece for the local gallery's upcoming show, hoping this would be her big break. The painting depicted a woman reaching toward stars that seemed just out of grasp, a metaphor that felt all too personal these days. The bell above the door chimed, and Emma looked up to see a man in an expensive charcoal suit scanning the menu board with obvious confusion. He stood out among the usual crowd of students and local artists like a peacock in a flock of sparrows. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and even from across the counter, she could tell his watch probably cost more than her rent for 3 months. Oliver Sterling had never been inside a coffee shop like this before. His usual routine involved a personal assistant bringing him artisanal coffee from the executive kitchen in his corner office 40 floors above the city. But today his driver had called in sick, his assistant was handling a crisis, and he had walked out of a particularly frustrating board meeting, needing air and caffeine. The small shop seemed quaint, almost foreign to someone who lived in a world of glass towers and leather-bound conference rooms. He approached the counter, noting how the young woman behind it seemed completely absorbed in creating some elaborate foam art on a customer's drink. Her concentration was absolute, tongue slightly poking out as she worked, and something about her focus reminded him of his own intensity when coding in his early days. For investors and quarterly reports consumed his life. Emma finished the design and handed the cup to Mrs. Patterson, her favorite regular customer who always ordered a vanilla latte with extra foam. When she turned to the suited stranger, she was momentarily taken aback by his piercing blue eyes and the way he seemed to study everything with analytical precision. "Good morning, what can I get started for you today?" she asked, her voice carrying the practiced warmth she used with all customers. Though something about this man made her feel slightly nervous, Oliver found himself staring longer than appropriate. Up close, he could see flecks of green paint on her fingers and a small scar above her left eyebrow that somehow made her more interesting rather than less. She had the kind of natural beauty that needed no enhancement, and her smile seemed genuine, in a way he rarely encountered in his world of calculated interactions. "I need something strong," he said finally, then immediately regretted how that sounded. "Coffee, I mean. Something to help me think clearly." Emma grinned, and the expression transformed her entire face. "Rough morning? I have just the thing. My signature drink, guaranteed to solve at least half your problems or your money back. Only half." Oliver found himself almost smiling, which was unusual for him during business hours. "Well, I'm good, but I'm not a miracle worker," she replied, already reaching for her tools. "Though if you tell me what the other half of your problems are, I might be able to help with those too." Sometimes talking to a stranger is exactly what you need. Oliver watched as she worked, her movements fluid and confident. Steam rose around her like morning mist, and he found the process unexpectedly mesmerizing. "I'm supposed to be in a meeting right now, making decisions that affect thousands of people. But instead, I walked out because I couldn't stand another minute of corporate double talk." Emma paused in her milk steaming. "Sounds like you need more than coffee. You need perspective." She resumed her work, but her voice took on a more thoughtful tone. "You know what I do when I feel overwhelmed? I paint. There's something about creating something beautiful that makes all the business stuff seem less important." "You're an artist?" Oliver asked, genuinely curious. He couldn't remember the last time he had talked to someone whose primary concern wasn't profit margins or market share, "It's trying to be," Emma admitted, adding a final flourish to his drink. "Right now I'm mostly a barista who paints in her spare time, but I'm working toward the artist part." She handed him the cup, and their fingers brushed briefly during the exchange. The contact was electric, unexpected, and both of them pulled back slightly, off guard by the intensity of such a simple touch. Oliver looked down at his coffee and was amazed to see a perfect leaf pattern in the foam. So detailed it seemed. Almost too beautiful to drink. "This is incredible. You really made this?" Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks at his obvious admiration. "It's just latte art. Nothing fancy." "No, this is skill. This is art," Oliver insisted, taking a careful sip. The coffee was perfect, rich and smooth, with subtle notes he couldn't identify but knew were exactly what he needed. "How long have you been doing this? The coffee or the art?" Emma asked, leaning against the counter as the morning rush temporarily subsided. "Both." Emma found herself opening up to this stranger in a way that surprised her. Usually she kept conversations with customers light and brief, but something about his genuine interest made her want to share. "I've been drawing since I could hold a crayon, but I only started taking it seriously in college. The coffee thing started as a way to pay for art supplies and rent, but I've discovered I actually enjoy it. There's something meditative about the process, and I love making people happy with something as simple as a perfect cup of coffee." Oliver listened intently, struck by how passionate she became when talking about her work. In his world, people talked about quarterly earnings and market dominance. But this woman spoke about making people happy through simple acts of creation. It was refreshing and somehow revolutionary. "What kind of art do you create?" he asked. Settling onto one of the worn bar stools at the counter, Emma's eyes lit up completely. "Mostly paintings, some mixed media. I'm fascinated by the contrast between dreams and reality, the space between what we hope for and what we have. I paint a lot of figures reaching toward something, whether it's light or stars or just something beyond the frame." Oliver felt something stir in his chest, a recognition he couldn't quite name. "Sounds beautiful and meaningful." "Thank you," Emma said softly, surprised by how much his approval meant to her. "What about you? What do you do when you're not walking out of important meetings?" Oliver hesitated. In his experience, telling people about his wealth and position usually changed how they treated him. Either they became calculating and interested in what he could do for them, or they became intimidated and distant, for the first time in years. He was enjoying a conversation where someone saw him as just a person, not a bank account or a business opportunity. "I work in technology," he said finally, which was true if understated. "I help develop software that connects people, though lately I feel more disconnected than ever." Emma nodded thoughtfully.
Technology can be lonely, I imagine.
"You're creating ways for people to connect, but you're probably spending most of your time alone with computers." Her insight was so accurate it made Oliver's chest tighten. "Exactly. I used to love the problem-solving aspect, the creative challenge of building something from nothing. But somewhere along the way, it became about growth and profits instead, of innovation and connection." "Maybe you need to remember why you started," Emma suggested gently. "What made you fall in love with technology in the first place?" Oliver thought about this as he sipped his coffee. "I wanted to build bridges. I thought if I could create platforms where people could really see and understand each other, maybe the world would be a little less lonely." "That's beautiful," Emma said, and she meant it. "And you know what? I think you're still doing that, even if it doesn't always feel like it. Every time someone connects with another person through something you built, you've created a little bridge." Their conversation was interrupted by a sharp knock on the window. Oliver turned to see a man in a black suit gesturing urgently at him, clearly agitated. Oliver's shoulders sagged as reality came crashing back. "That's Vincent, my business partner," he explained to Emma. "I think my brief escape from the corporate world is over." Emma felt an unexpected pang of disappointment. She had been enjoying their conversation more than any she'd had in months, and the thought of him leaving back to whatever high-powered world he inhabited made her feel oddly bereft. Oliver stood reluctantly, pulling out his wallet. "What do I owe you for the coffee and the therapy session?" "The coffee is $4.50 and the therapy is free for first-time customers." Emma replied with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Oliver handed her a $20 bill. "Keep the change." And Emma. He paused, realizing he had learned her name from her badge, but she didn't know his. "Thank you. This conversation meant more to me than you probably realize." "What's your name?" Emma asked. "Not ready to let this connection end completely, Oliver," he said. Then after a moment's hesitation, "Oliver Sterling." Emma's eyes widened slightly. Even someone who lived modestly and paid little attention to business news had heard of Oliver Sterling. The tech billionaire whose company had revolutionized social networking. It's the man who had just shared coffee and conversation with her, talking about loneliness and lost dreams, was one of the most powerful men in the city. "I should have recognized you," she said quietly, suddenly feeling foolish. "Please don't," Oliver said urgently, seeing how her expression had changed. "Don't let that change anything. For the past 30 minutes, I felt like a regular person, having a real conversation with someone interesting. That's rare for me." Before Emma could respond, Vincent burst through the door. "Oliver, we've been looking everywhere for you. The board is threatening to call an emergency session if you don't get back for the Henderson meeting." Oliver nodded grimly, then turned back to Emma. "I have to go, but I hope I'll see you again." "I'm here most mornings," Emma managed to say, still processing the revelation of who he really was, as Oliver followed Vincent out of the coffee shop. He turned back once to see Emma, watching him through the window. She raised her hand in a small wave, and he found himself memorizing every detail of her face, knowing that returning to his world of boardrooms and quarterly reports would feel even more suffocating. Now that he had remembered what genuine human connection felt like, Emma stood behind the counter long after Oliver's expensive car had disappeared into traffic, her mind reeling from the morning's unexpected encounter. She had served coffee to hundreds of people, but none had left her feeling like something fundamental had shifted in her world. Little did she know that 40 floors above the city, Oliver Sterling was staring out his office window, thinking not about market projections or investor demands, but about paint-stained fingers and a smile that had made him remember why he had wanted to build bridges in the first place. 3 days passed before Oliver found an excuse to return to Moonbeam Coffee. He told himself it was simply because Emma made excellent coffee, but the truth was more complicated. Her words about remembering why he started had echoed in his mind through countless meetings and conference calls. For the first time in years, he found himself questioning not just his daily routine, but the entire trajectory his life had taken. Emma had spent those same 3 days replaying their conversation, caught between hoping he would return and convincing herself that a man like Oliver Sterling belonged in a different universe entirely. She had even researched him online, finding articles about his company's latest innovations and his reputation as a brilliant but reclusive entrepreneur. The photos showed him in perfectly tailored suits at charity galas and tech conferences, looking every inch the billionaire businessman. It seemed impossible that this was the same man who had sat at her counter talking about loneliness and lost dreams. When the familiar bell chimed on Thursday morning, Emma looked up from the espresso machine to see Oliver entering this time, dressed more casually in dark jeans and a navy sweater. He looked younger somehow, less burdened, and when their eyes met across the counter, his smile was immediate and genuine.
"Back for more therapy?"
Emma asked, surprised by how relieved she felt to see him. "The coffee was exceptional," Oliver replied, approaching the counter with less hesitation than before, "and the company was even better." Emma felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. "Same drink as before?" "Actually, I was hoping you might recommend something new, I realize. I've been ordering the same coffee for years without ever considering there might be better options." Emma grinned, understanding the metaphor beneath his words. "Feeling adventurous, are we? I have just the thing." She began crafting something elaborate, mixing espresso with steamed milk infused with vanilla and a hint of cinnamon. "This is my grandmother's recipe, adapted for modern tastes. She used to make it for my grandfather every morning when I was little." Oliver watched her work, noting how her entire demeanor changed when she talked about her family. "Are they still around? Your grandparents?" Emma's smile softened. My grandmother passed away 2 years ago, but she's the one who taught me that food and drink can be expressions of love. Every cup I make carries a little bit of that philosophy. That's beautiful, Oliver said, meaning it completely. My grandmother taught me that success was measured only in achievements and acquisitions. I'm beginning to think your grandmother was wiser. Emma handed him the finished drink, their fingers brushing again in the exchange. This time, neither pulled away immediately, and the brief contact sent electricity through both of them. Taste it, she said softly. Oliver sipped the coffee and closed his eyes, savoring not just the rich flavor but the care that had gone into creating it. This is incredible. Tastes like comfort and home, and something I didn't even know I was missing. Before Emma could respond, her roommate Grace burst through the door, paint splattered and breathless. Grace was everything Emma wasn't: bold, dramatic, and utterly fearless. Her red hair was wild from the wind, and she wore a vintage dress that somehow looked perfectly put together despite being covered in artistic chaos. Emma, you will not believe what just happened, Grace announced, then stopped short when she noticed Oliver. Her eyes widened as recognition dawned. Oh my God, you're Oliver Sterling. Emma winced, hoping Grace wouldn't make the situation awkward. But Oliver stood and extended his hand with genuine politeness. Guilty as charged. You must be a friend of Emma's. Grace shook his hand, clearly struggling between starstruck amazement and artistic disdain for corporate wealth. Grace Morrison. I'm Emma's roommate and fellow struggling artist, though I specialize in sculpture and controlled chaos, Grace Emma warned, knowing her friend's tendency toward brutal honesty. What? I'm being nice, Grace protested. Actually going to ask if you're here slumming for inspiration, or if you're genuinely interested in our Emma. Grace. Emma's face flamed red, but Oliver laughed, the first genuine laugh Emma had heard from him. I like her, he said to Emma. To answer your question, Grace, I'm here because your roommate makes the best coffee in the city, and has reminded me that there are more important things than quarterly earnings. Grace studied him with the intense gaze she usually reserved for analyzing sculpture angles. Interesting. Emma, I came to tell you that Marcus Fletcher wants to meet with you about the gallery show. He saw your latest piece and wants to discuss. Featuring it prominently, Emma's eyes went wide. Marcus Fletcher owned the most prestigious gallery in the arts district, and having him notice her work was beyond anything she had dared hope for. Are you serious? He actually said that, dead serious. Meeting set for tomorrow afternoon if you can make it. Oliver watched Emma's face transform with excitement and felt something shift in his chest. This was what passion looked like when it was about to be rewarded, and he found himself more invested in her success than he had been in any business deal in recent memory. That's incredible news, he said to Emma. You must be thrilled. Terrified, actually, Emma admitted. But the good kind of terrified. Grace was still studying Oliver with obvious curiosity. So what brings a tech billionaire to our little corner of the world? Surely you have people who can fetch your coffee. I do, Oliver said honestly. But they can't provide the kind of conversation that actually matters. Something in his tone made Grace's expression soften slightly. Fair enough, Emma. I'll leave you to your coffee consultation. Don't forget about Fletcher. A pastry from the display case and headed back out. But not before shooting Emma a meaningful look that clearly said they would be discussing this later. Oliver turned back to Emma, who was still glowing from Grace's news. A gallery showing sounds like a big deal. It could be life-changing, Emma said, then caught herself. I mean, probably not life-changing in the way you think of it, but for someone like me, having Marcus Fletcher notice my work is huge. Someone like you, Oliver asked, his tone gentle but probing. Emma realized how her words had sounded. I just meant someone without connections or a trust fund or any of the usual advantages. Oliver was quiet for a moment, understanding the implicit comparison to his own privileged position. You know, all the advantages in the world don't mean anything if you're not passionate about what you're doing. You have something I lost years ago, the courage to pursue what matters to you, despite the uncertainty. It's not courage, Emma said. It's stubbornness and probably a fair amount of delusion. No, Oliver said firmly. It's courage, and it's inspiring. Their conversation was interrupted by the lunch rush. Ta. And Oliver reluctantly stepped aside as Emma served a steady stream of customers. He found himself reluctant to leave, partly because he enjoyed watching her work, but mostly because returning to his office felt like stepping back into a cage. When the rush finally subsided, Emma found Oliver still sitting at a corner table, his expensive laptop open, but apparently forgotten, as he stared out the window. "You know, most people don't use Moonbeam coffee as their office," she said, approaching his table with a fresh cup. "Most people don't make me want to rethink my entire life philosophy," Oliver replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. Emma felt her heart skip at his words. "I didn't do anything special. You reminded me that success isn't just about building bigger and more profitable companies. You showed me that there's value in creating something beautiful, even if it's just perfect foam art that gets consumed in 5 minutes." Emma sat down across from him, surprising herself with her boldness. "Can I ask you something? Anything? Do you ever think about doing something completely different, using your resources and connections for something that feeds your soul instead of just your bank account?" Oliver considered this seriously. "Lately, yes. I have thousands of employees, investors, commitments. I can't just walk away from that." "I'm not suggesting you walk away," Emma said carefully. "Maybe there are ways to use your position to support the kinds of things that matter to you. Art, creativity, genuine human connection." Oliver stared at her, struck by the simplicity and wisdom of her suggestion. "You mean like funding arts programs, or supporting emerging artists? Or creating platforms that showcase creativity instead of just facilitating commerce? Using technology to elevate beauty instead of just efficiency?" The idea resonated through Oliver like a bell being struck. He had been so focused on growth and profit that he had forgotten his original vision of connecting people in meaningful ways. Emma was suggesting he could return to that vision while using everything he had learned about business success. "You're brilliant," he said suddenly, and the intensity in his voice made Emma's breath catch. "I'm just a barista with opinions," she protested, but Oliver was already shaking his head. "No, you see possibilities where I see only problems. You see potential where I see only obstacles." He reached across the table and gently touched her hand. "Emma, would you have dinner with me tomorrow night? Somewhere we can continue this conversation without interruption." Emma's heart raced at the contact and the invitation. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, but reality intruded. "Oliver, I appreciate the offer, but we live in completely different worlds. You're Oliver Sterling, and I'm just someone who serves coffee and paints in her spare time." "Those different worlds are exactly why this matters," Oliver said earnestly. "You've given me more clarity in 3 conversations than my board of advisors has provided in 3 years. Honestly, I haven't felt this excited about anything in longer than I care to admit." Emma looked into his eyes and saw something that made her decision easy. Beyond the obvious attraction, beyond the thrill of being pursued by someone like Oliver Sterling, she saw a genuine connection. This man understood her in a way that felt rare and precious. "Okay," she said softly, but somewhere quiet. "I don't think I'm ready for photographers and gossip columnists." Oliver's smile was radiant. "I know exactly the place. It's a small restaurant in the hills, completely private. The owner is a friend who values discretion." As Emma walked home that evening, she felt like she was floating. Grace met her at the door with raised eyebrows and a bottle of wine. "Spill everything," Grace demanded, pouring 2 generous glasses. "And don't even think about downplaying this. Oliver Sterling does not spend hours in coffee shops unless something significant is happening." Emma told her everything from their easy conversation to the dinner invitation. Grace listened with growing amazement. "Emma, do you realize what this could mean for you? Not just romantically, but for your career. Someone with his connections could change everything for you." "That's not why I'm interested in him," Emma said quickly. "I genuinely like him. He's thoughtful and lonely and passionate about things that matter." "I believe you," Grace said. "But that doesn't mean you can't benefit from the connection. There's nothing wrong with your worlds helping each other." That night, Emma lay awake thinking about Grace's words and her upcoming dinner with Oliver. She was walking into uncharted territory, but for the first time in her life, the unknown felt more exciting than terrifying. Tomorrow would bring her meeting with Marcus Fletcher and her dinner with Oliver, 2 events that could reshape her future in ways she was only beginning to imagine. 40 floors above the city, Oliver stood at his office window looking down at the lights below, each one representing someone with dreams and struggles and hopes. Emma had reminded him that his success meant nothing if it didn't contribute to something larger than himself. Tomorrow, he would begin figuring out how to build bridges again, starting with the one forming between his world and hers, the meeting with Marcus. Fletcher exceeded every expectation Emma had dared to nurture. The gallery owner, a distinguished man in his 60s, with silver hair and an eye for emerging talent, had spent an hour examining her portfolio with the kind of focused attention that made her feel like a real artist for the first time in her life. "Your work has a rare quality," Fletcher had said, adjusting his glasses as he studied her latest painting. "You capture the tension between aspiration and reality in a way that speaks to the human condition. I want to feature 3 of your pieces in next month's Emerging Voices exhibition, with your Starscape as the centerpiece." Emma had barely managed to thank him coherently before floating out of the gallery in a daze. Grace had been waiting outside and immediately swept her into a celebratory embrace that attracted stares from passersby. "This calls for champagne and a complete wardrobe overhaul," Grace declared. "You're having dinner with a billionaire, and you just landed your first major gallery showing. Tonight is going to be perfect." Now, as Emma stood in front of her small closet mirror, wearing the simple black dress Grace had insisted she buy, she felt a mixture of excitement and terror that made her hand shake slightly as she applied lip gloss. The dress was elegant, but understated, hitting just below her knees and accentuating her figure without being obvious about it. She had left her hair down in soft waves, and for once, she felt beautiful in a way that seemed effortless. Oliver arrived precisely on time, and when Emma opened the door to her modest apartment, his sharp intake of breath told her everything she needed to know about how she looked. He wore dark slacks and a charcoal sweater that highlighted his eyes, and he held a single white orchid instead of the typical dozen roses. "You look stunning," he said softly, offering her the flower. "I thought this seemed more like you than something flashy." Emma accepted the orchid with a smile that illuminated her entire face. "It's perfect. Thank you." The restaurant Oliver had chosen was tucked into the hills overlooking the city, small and intimate with exposed brick walls and tables lit by candles. The owner, a warm Italian woman named Sophia, greeted Oliver like family and showed them to a corner table with a view of the twinkling lights below. "This is incredible," Emma said, taking in the atmosphere. "How did you find this place?" "Sophia and her husband opened it 20 years ago with a loan from my company's small business initiative," Oliver explained. "I try to eat here whenever I need to remember why I got into business in the first place." Emma felt another piece of the Oliver Sterling puzzle click into place. Beneath the corporate success story was someone who genuinely cared about supporting others' dreams. "Tell me about that initiative," she said as they perused the handwritten menu. Oliver's face lit up as he described the program that provided funding and mentorship to small businesses, particularly those owned by immigrants and women. "It's one of the few parts of my company that feels purely good," he admitted. "No shareholders questioning the return on investment. No board members suggesting we focus on more profitable ventures." "Maybe that's your answer," Emma suggested gently. "Maybe, instead of feeling trapped by your success, you can use it to create more programs like that. Build bridges between big business and individual dreams." Their conversation flowed as naturally as it had in the coffee shop, but with an added layer of intimacy that made Emma acutely aware of every glance, every smile, every moment when Oliver's attention focused completely on her. When he laughed at her stories about the eccentric customers at Moonbeam Coffee, she felt like the most fascinating woman in the world, over Sophia's incredible homemade pasta. Oliver told Emma about his childhood. Growing up with parents who valued achievement above everything else. "I was coding before I could ride a bike," he said with a wry smile. "My parents saw my aptitude and decided that was my path. No deviation allowed. Did you ever rebel?" Emma asked, twirling linguine around her fork. "Once, when I was 16, I told them I wanted to take art classes. My father informed me that art was a hobby for people who couldn't do anything useful." Oliver's expression darkened slightly. "I never brought it up again." Emma reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. It's not too late, you. No. To explore the creative side you never got to develop. The touch of her hand sent warmth shooting up Oliver's arm and straight to his heart. Being around you makes me believe that, he said quietly. You make me want to remember who I might have been if I'd had the courage to choose my own path. You can still choose, Emma said. Maybe not the same path you would have taken at 16, but one that incorporates both who you are now and who you wanted to be then? Their dessert arrived, a shared plate of tiramisu that required them to lean closer together. The intimacy of sharing food, combined with the wine and candlelight, created a cocoon around their table that made the rest of the world fade away. Emma, Oliver said, as they finished the last bites of dessert, I need to tell you something. Hey. Seriousness in his tone made Emma's pulse quicken. What is it? I haven't felt this way about anyone in years. Maybe ever. His blue eyes held hers steadily. You've changed something fundamental in me in just a few days. I know our situations are complicated. I know people will have opinions about us, but I can't pretend this is just casual interest anymore. Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. Oliver, I feel the same way, but I'm scared. Your world, the media attention, the expectations, I don't know if I'm strong enough for all of that. Then we'll figure it out together, Oliver said, reaching for her hand again. I've spent my entire adult life making calculated decisions based on market research and risk assessment. For once, I want to do something because it feels right, because it makes me happy. Emma looked into his eyes and saw not the intimidating billionaire from magazine covers, but the man who had sat in her coffee shop, talking about loneliness and lost dreams. Okay, she whispered. Let's see where this goes. The drive back to her apartment was quiet, both of them lost in the weight of what they had acknowledged. When Oliver walked her to her door, Emma found herself reluctant to end the evening. Would you like to come up for coffee? She asked, then immediately blushed at how the invitation sounded. Oliver smiled gently.
I would love to, but I want to.
Do this right. I want to court you properly, not rush into something because the chemistry is overwhelming. Emma felt her heart melt a little more. You're remarkable, you know that? You bring out the best in me, Oliver replied, cupping her face gently with one hand. May I kiss you goodnight? Emma nodded, and when Oliver's lips met hers, the kiss was soft and sweet and full of promise. It lasted only a moment, but it left. Emma feeling like she was glowing from the inside out. I'll see you tomorrow, Oliver asked against her forehead. I'll be at Moonbeam at 7, Emma confirmed. The next few weeks passed in a blur of stolen moments and growing intimacy. Oliver became a regular at the coffee shop, often bringing his laptop and working from the corner table while Emma served. Customers. She found excuses to refill his cup more often than necessary. He found reasons to stay long past when his work was finished. Their dates were carefully planned to avoid public scrutiny. Quiet dinners at Sophia's restaurant, walks through the sculpture garden after hours. Evenings at Emma's apartment, where she painted while Oliver worked on his laptop and they talked about everything and nothing. Grace had initially been skeptical of the relationship, worried that Emma was setting herself up for heartbreak. When Oliver inevitably returned to his stratosphere of wealth and privilege, but seeing them together gradually won her over. I've never seen you this happy, she admitted to Emma one evening, as they prepared dinner in their tiny kitchen. And he looks at you like you hung the moon. Maybe this crazy thing could actually work. The first real test came when Oliver's business partner Vincent discovered the relationship. Emma was at Oliver's penthouse apartment for the first time, marveling at the floor-to-ceiling windows and expensive art. When Vincent arrived unannounced for what he assumed would be a private business discussion, Oliver, we need to talk about the Henderson acquisition, Vincent said, stopping short when he saw Emma curled on the couch with a book. Oh, I didn't realize you had company. Emma stood awkwardly, suddenly feeling out of place in the luxurious surroundings. I should go, she said quietly to Oliver. No, Oliver said firmly, moving to stand beside her. Vincent, I'd like you to meet Emma Rodriguez. Emma, this is my business partner, Vincent Crawford. Vincent's expression was carefully neutral as he shook Emma's hand, but she could feel his assessment of her, weighing her worth and finding her lacking. Pleasure to meet you, Miss Rodriguez. I hope you'll excuse us, but Oliver and I have urgent business to discuss. Of course, Emma said, gathering her things. I'll call you later, Oliver. After Emma left, Vincent didn't waste time with subtlety. Oliver, what are you thinking? A barista. The board will have a field day if this gets out. The board doesn't dictate my personal life, Oliver replied coolly. Your personal life affects the company's image. And this girl, she's obviously after your money. Women like that always are. Oliver's voice turned dangerous. Women like what, Vincent? Women who work for a living? Women who pursue their passions despite financial hardship? Be very careful how you finish that sentence. Vincent held up his hands. I'm just looking out for you. And for the company. You've worked too hard to build sterling technologies to risk it all for some pretty face. Emma isn't some pretty face, Oliver said quietly. She's the most genuine person I've ever met. She knew who I was and still treated me like a regular person. She challenges me, inspires me, makes me want to be better than I am. And when the novelty wears off, when she realizes how different your worlds are, this will end badly, Oliver. It always does. That conversation planted seeds of doubt that grew over the following days. Emma noticed Oliver seemed distracted, less present during their time together. When she asked what was wrong, he deflected. With work stress, but she could feel him pulling away. The breaking point came when photos of them together surfaced in a gossip blog. Someone had snapped pictures of them leaving Sophia's restaurant, and the headline read, Tech Billionaire's Mystery. Woman? Who is Emma Rodriguez? Emma discovered the article when concerned customers at Moonbeam Coffee showed her the story on their phones. The photos were grainy but unmistakably them, and the article speculated wildly about her background and motives. When Oliver arrived at the coffee shop that afternoon, Emma was waiting with the article pulled up on her tablet. We need to talk, she said quietly. They walked to the nearby waterfront park where they had shared their first kiss weeks earlier. The autumn air was crisp, and Emma wrapped her coat tighter around herself as they found a bench overlooking the water. The article doesn't matter, Oliver said before Emma could speak. Gossip blogs write nonsense. It'll blow over, will it? Emma asked. Oliver, I've gotten 3 calls today from reporters wanting quotes. Grace has been fielding interview requests. This is just the beginning. Oliver was quiet, knowing she was right. I can handle the attention, Emma continued. What I can't handle is feeling like you're ashamed of me. You've been distant lately, and I can't help thinking Vincent got to you. Vincent is concerned about the company's image. Oliver admitted reluctantly. Emma felt something cold settle in her stomach. And, am I bad for your image? No, Oliver said quickly. Emma, you're the best thing that's happened to me in years. But Vincent made some valid points about the challenges we'll face, such as... Oliver struggled to find words that wouldn't hurt her. The media scrutiny, the assumptions people will make, the pressure from the board. Emma stood up, pacing too. The railing overlooking the water. So what are you saying? That this was all some kind of experiment? A walk on the wild side before you go back to dating appropriate women from your social circle. That's not what I'm saying at all, Oliver protested, standing to follow her. I'm saying it's complicated. Love is always complicated, Emma said, turning to face him with tears in her eyes. The question is whether it's worth fighting for. Oliver saw the pain in her expression and felt something crack inside his chest. Emma, you have to understand the position I'm in. No, I don't, Emma said quietly. What I understand is that you're letting other people's opinions matter more than what we have together. You're choosing your image over your heart. It's not that simple, isn't it? Emma asked.
Oliver, I fell in love with you. Not your money, not your status, not what
you could do for my career. I fell in love with the man who sat in my coffee shop and talked about feeling disconnected. The man who remembered what it felt like to want to build bridges instead of walls. The word love hung in the air between them, spoken for the first time. Oliver felt his heart stop, then restart with painful intensity. I love you too, he said desperately. Emma, I love you more than I thought I was capable of loving anyone. Then fight for us, Emma said, stepping closer. Show me that what we have is stronger than what other people think about it. Oliver looked into her eyes and saw his choice clearly laid out before him. He could choose safety, the approval of his board and business partners, the comfortable predictability of his established life, or he could choose love, with all its complications and challenges and incredible rewards. He thought about the past few weeks, how Emma had brought color back into his black and white world, how her laughter had become his favorite sound, how her presence made him feel more like himself than he had in years, how she had inspired him to remember his original dreams and given him the courage to pursue them. "You're right," he said finally. "I've been letting fear make my decisions instead of love." Oliver pulled out his phone and dialed Vincent's number. When his business partner answered, Oliver spoke clearly and firmly. "Vincent, I need you to schedule a board meeting for tomorrow morning. I have some announcements to make about the future direction of Sterling Technologies." Emma watched with growing hope as Oliver continued.
Oh.
"And Vincent, the woman you met yesterday isn't just some random person I'm dating. She's the woman I'm in love with. And I won't tolerate any disrespect toward her from you or anyone else associated with the company." After he hung up, Oliver turned back to Emma. "I'm going to propose a new initiative to the board, foundation that supports emerging artists and small businesses, funded by a percentage of our profits. I want you to help me run it." Widened. "Oliver, you don't have to do that for me." "I'm not doing it for you," Oliver said, pulling her into his arms. "I'm doing it for us. For the future, we can build together if we're brave enough to try." 6 months later, Emma stood in Marcus Fletcher's gallery, surrounded by her paintings and a crowd of people who had come to celebrate her first solo exhibition. The Sterling Foundation for Creative Innovation had provided funding for the show, but Emma's talent had earned the recognition. Oliver stood across the room, watching Emma discuss her work with potential buyers and art critics. She wore a midnight blue dress that brought out her eyes, and she moved through the crowd with a confidence that took his breath away. This was Emma in her element, no longer hiding her light under a bushel, but letting it shine for the world. 2C Grace appeared at his elbow with 2 glasses of champagne. "She's incredible, isn't she?" Grace said, following his gaze. "She's everything," Oliver replied simply. "You know, I owe you an apology," Grace continued. "I thought you were just another rich guy looking for a pretty distraction. I was wrong." Oliver smiled. "You were protecting your friend. I respect that." "She's happy, Oliver."
Happier than I've ever seen her. You both are. Ow.
Oliver nodded, his hand moving unconsciously to the small velvet box in his jacket pocket. Tomorrow night, he would take Emma to the rooftop garden of his building, where he had arranged for a private dinner under the stars. Tomorrow night, he would ask her to marry him and build a life together that honored both of their dreams. But tonight, he was content to watch the woman he loved bloom in the spotlight she had always deserved, knowing that they had chosen each other not despite their differences, but because of how those differences made them stronger together. Emma caught his eye across the room and smiled. It's the same radiant expression that had first captured his heart in a small coffee shop months ago. Oliver raised his champagne glass in a silent toast to the future they were building together. One bridge at a time, as the evening wound down and the last guests filtered out of the gallery, Emma found herself alone with Oliver among her paintings. The centerpiece, the one that had caught Marcus Fletcher's attention, showed a woman reaching toward stars that no longer seemed impossibly distant. "Penny for your thoughts," Oliver said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Emma leaned back, against his chest, feeling the solid warmth of him. "I was thinking about that first morning when you walked into Moonbeam Coffee. Someone had told me then that you would change my entire life. I never would have believed them." "You changed mine first," Oliver murmured against her hair. "You reminded me that success without love is just empty achievement." Emma turned in his arms, studying his face in the soft gallery lighting. "What happens now?" Oliver smiled, thinking of the ring waiting in his pocket, of the foundation they were building together, of all the mornings he hoped to wake up beside her. "Now we write the rest of our story together," as they kissed, surrounded by Emma's art. Both of them knew they had found something rarer than success or fame or fortune. They had found love that transcended boundaries, dreams that grew stronger when shared, and a future bright enough to illuminate even the darkest corners of their separate pasts. The simple girl who served coffee had indeed stolen the millionaire's heart, but in return, he'd given her something infinitely more valuable: the courage to believe that love could conquer any obstacle, bridge any gap, and transform to individual dreams into one shared destiny.